Whether this is a fracturing again of the model that we see in the garden, that might be part and parcel of the whole parallel with the Genesis account.
Hello and welcome to Sacred Book, a respectful, very detailed commentary on the Bible, both the New Testament and the Tanakh.
Steve.
And Mark. Steve, what we're about to cover is about how sin potentially continues, how the world is being partitioned because it's a new world order now, almost. And there are people, if you go to seminaries or do a theological degree, who say that this is later writing, trying to justify that the land of Canaan was then subjected by the Israelites. So Canaan is cursed, but not the Hamitic nations like Egypt. So Ham is not cursed, and we'll explain that as we carry on. There seems to be a sin that is committed by one of Noah's sons. Genesis 9:18. And the sons of Noah that went forth from the ark were Shem and Ham and Japheth, and Ham is the father of Canaan.
I think it's just interesting that a distinction is made at this point. Who is Shem the father of? Who is Japheth the father of? That's not pointed out to us. But Ham was noted as the father of Canaan. So clearly, right up front, it is drawing our attention to something that's going to come in the text.
Shem is going to be the forerunner of Abraham. Shem, Semites, people of Asia. Ham is the people of Africa, and Ham means hot. And Yefet is going to be the father of the people of Europe, although Islam also adds in the Chinese. Japheth, strange, it means enlargement or expand, and that comes out in the text in a moment. At this point, they're off the ark, and what Scripture is saying is that these are going to be the progenitors of people around the earth.
That's exactly what it says. And the Hebrew word for earth here would be eretz. That can mean land, earth, whole earth, piece of ground. The whole earth being populated, is it the whole earth as in the entire globe, or is it the land? So I just think we should be sort of sensitive to that.
What do you think it is?
It's all going to depend on whether you believe that this was a regional flood or whether you believe it was a global cataclysmic flood. But whether or not the whole earth was flooded is up for debate, but you could still have effects of the flood around the globe with tsunamis and other bits and pieces. Epicenter of the flood, I would say, is in this region. I am a little bit ambivalent about it.
Moses is writing this long after the event. So it's not just the physical effects, it's also the shared memory, and it's the people are here, where did they come from? And it could be Moses saying that he saw this vision. I think you said that God turned his back towards him and the back is looking back in the past. How do you put that across? Were you saying that the sons ended up being the forerunners, the fathers of all these people? So that kind of makes sense. Genesis 9:20. I'm going to read 3 individual versions of Scripture. The first one is the King James Bible. It says, and Noah began to be an husbandman, and he planted a vineyard. The JPS, which we are predominantly using, says, and Noah the husbandman began and planted a vineyard. But the version of the Complete Jewish Bible states the following. Noach, a farmer, was the first to plant a vineyard. Husbandman is a word that's really out of use now. We're not talking the husband of a wife, we're talking about somebody who tills the earth. And Scripture categorically states that it began, or vineyards, with Noah.
He was a man of the soil, wasn't he? Think about that in the Hebrew. Adoma. Who was Adam? Adam.
Yes.
Again, you've got this play coming in on the words. In the beginning, God created man from the soil, Adam. In the new creation, post-flood, you have Noah being a man of the soil, Adoma. So he was a tiller of the ground, as a farmer, yes. But it's also an interesting Hebraic play of the parallels between the original creation and this recreation that we're looking into, because it's a mirroring of the creation account.
Prior to the flood, the ground was associated with curse. After the flood, it's now the starting of the tilling of the earth, which is going to be food for ourselves. Am I right to assume then that there's no longer such an idea of the cursedness of the ground?
I don't know that the ground would not still be cursed, because Paul talks about in the New Testament that all of creation is groaning as if in labour. I would say that what we're seeing is where we have had chaos and then order brought out in the original creation. We see the curse being the chaos, but order coming from the curse in order to provide for humanity for the future. We're getting this constant sort of backwards and forwards between the play on the wording. I wouldn't say it's saying that the ground is no longer cursed. I would say that even out of the curse there is good that can come.
Why vines? You only have to go back not very far into ancient Greek and ancient Roman tradition, and there was Bacchus and the idea that the wine gave us as humans something in return from imbibing the liquid. The Greeks saw it as some way of opening up, let loose in your inhibitions. I'm not sure what the Hebrew tradition is with wine and whether it's something similar, but I'm interested in that it's wine that he's making. He's not growing corn, he's making wine. And as you say, nothing is wasted in Scripture. So why wine?
Who is the book all about?
Jesus.
So from a Christian perspective, the book is all about Jesus, and John 15:1, Jesus says, I am the true vine. My Father is the gardener. At the very beginning here, we're getting a remez, a hint, maybe even a sot, the secret, the hidden thing. That the hope of all of the world, the hope of everything moving forward from this point in time, the very first thing after an altar is raised is that he starts to produce a vineyard. From a Christian perspective, Jesus is the hope of all the world moving forward. The vineyard as well is highly symbolic of Israel. Israel is always referred to as the vineyard of God. From the Hebraic stock, you get Jesus who comes through. So this continuity of the vine from the recreation all the way through to Jesus is quite significant.
There's also mention in Scripture that if somebody goes past your vineyard, you shouldn't get upset if they take a handful of grapes. That you should permit people who are homeless or have no food to help themselves to the produce.
Going through your fields of corn and the gleanings from the fields. I looked at this many years ago, and vineyard is made up in the ancient pictographic Hebrew, a bit like hieroglyphs.
Pre-Masoretic?
Yes. The original Hebrew for vineyard is made up of 3 letters. It's made up of Kaf, Resh, Mem. If you were to say it, it would be Krem. When you look at what those letters mean, and as you unpack them, they give a very interesting story in themselves. You can read it as, workers can be bent and shaped in the will of the one who is the head, the first, the beginning, and from that the mighty will flow.
I said Masoretic. A lot of old Hebrew without vowels, we don't know if it's the singular or the plural. The Masoretes put in the vowels to make sense of the text. In English, DVD, David, KLD, killed, TH, the, MN, is it men or is it man? And that's the importance of the Masoretes. From Noah the husbandman began and planted a vineyard, time goes forward because now he's drinking of the wine and was drunken, and he was uncovered within his tent. Drank of the wine is one thing. To say you're drunken is another. Is that shouldn't have happened? Or is it just a statement of fact? But he was uncovered within his tent. Why is that being mentioned? Are we assuming that it was so sodden with wine that he laid completely senseless? And how important is the word tent? Is this literal, or is there something else here?
He became drunk, he uncovered himself in his tent, and Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness. So that section there has probably two schools of thought. The first would be that Ham saw Noah, who had in his drunken state let his trousers down, and the point that the text is trying to make is that Ham had no respect for his father. So rather than looking out for him, covering him up and maintaining his dignity, he went outside and had a bit of a giggle about it with his two brothers, Shem and Japheth.
Which I believe some have said is a sin of omission. He did not turn his eyes away from his naked dad.
Yes, that is one view. I would say the vast majority of people would take on the basis that it's far more palatable. The view that I would hold regarding this is probably less palatable. While I accept that the use of the language is not exact, as I look at this, that expression, saw his father's nakedness, is a euphemism for sexual intercourse.
Leviticus 20:11.
And that lieth with his father's wife hath uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall surely be put to death, that their blood shall be upon them.
The more up-to-date version, the man who goes to bed with his father's wife has disgraced his father sexually, and both of them must be put to death. Their blood is on them. You believe that what it's saying?
That's how I would read it. The word seeing his father's nakedness doesn't always mean that.
So are you talking sodomy?
Yeah. The reason that I would read that is because then when we move further on in the text, and we'll get to there, but in verse 24, so if you think about this, let's say that Ham had gone into the tent, his dad was drunk, and Ham, for whatever reason, had decided to rape him, in effect, because there was no consent there. I'm saying that there's a sexual intercourse connotation to it. When I read that and I see that, I think, man, that's horrendous. What's Noah's reaction going to be to that? And then we get it in verse 24. When Noah awoke from his drunken stupor, he saw what his youngest son had done to him. There'll be people that would argue against this and say, well, that's a general sense. You can't draw that conclusion. It's a Hebrew verb, asar, which means to do. But then what you get is you get a reaction from Noah, which is to curse him or to curse his children. And the cursing of the children, Canaan, is important.
The original people listening to this would have understood what was being implied. and they'd never had a problem. For centuries afterwards, rabbinic thought, rabbis who spent all their lives discussing this over generation, considered what you have just said, and there are biblical scholars who write about this and say something similar. Why is it then that modern Christians don't want that to be the case?
There are some views around Scripture that we need to protect it from what it actually says.
From who? Who's being protected?
Well, it's like saying such things couldn't possibly be in the Scripture. They're far too lewd, they're rude. We've got to protect the text, we've got to protect the people of the text. And I'm not sure that we should be doing that. I think that the Bible is riddled with imperfect, flawed individuals who God uses. What we should do is recognise that by being a follower of this God, it doesn't make you perfect. It makes you an imperfect individual. We have a gracious God who works through imperfect individuals. But you're right, Rashi, in his commentary on Genesis, Sanhedrin 78, says there's a number of thoughts around this. Some say that he castrated him, referring to Ham, and some say that he sodomized him. There was always more than just looking at him. There was an act, there was something done to him. The curse wasn't given to Ham, it was given to the children. A result, and a physical act being done to Noah by Ham that Noah then reacted to when he came round.
If he was drunken and he was uncovered within his tent, why is that considered to be shameful? I read that was Noah in his drunken state trying to escape the post-apocalyptic horrors? Did he believe that being naked was a return to the time of Adam and Eve when they were naked? I don't know. That's how you could read it. That's how somebody has read it. If Ham saw the nakedness of his father, he told his two brethren without. Why would he tell them that what has just taken place? Was it a crime?
There weren't laws in terms of the Mosaic law, so in crimes against what? It was an act carried out which was clearly not aligned to the good of what was to flow. It was made very clear that they came out of the ark in families, Noah and his wife, his sons and their wife, and the animals in their species. That there was an expectation that species would stay with species, that they would be a male, female, male, female, male, female. Whether this is a fracturing again of the model that we see in the garden, that might be part and parcel of the whole parallel with the Genesis account. And God seeing the serpent searching for Adam and Eve, and they were hiding, they were naked, they were uncovered. What have you done? God says. And we almost get a mirroring, don't we, of where are you? What have you done with Noah? A mirroring going on again. Why would Ham have gone out and told his two brothers outside? Don't know. Whether he was just brash, bold, whether he was arrogant, don't know.
I'm interested in 23. And Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon both their shoulders and went backwards and covered the nakedness of their father. So the father's still comatose. And their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. Interesting imagery there. I'm not sure, because of the sheer amount of wordage that's being used, if there's a specific meaning that I'm missing. When we get to 24, again something jarring, because it states, "And Noah awoke from his wine, and knew what his youngest son had done unto him." I'm not sure Ham is the youngest, he's the middle son, if the order of the names imply anything. Isn't Japheth the youngest son?
Oh, I think he is the youngest son. I think the
Japheth.
order of the names have just been put in there because that was the order that they wanted it in order to convey a message.
Right.
But we're talking about them going in backwards and the promptness and the dedication that they showed to their father. It actually mirrors something in Exodus 6 verse 10, where the promptness and dedication of Moses and Aaron is brought into view. So the two brothers here not only covered their father's private parts, but they made sure that everything was completely covered up. That's how Radak, one of the Jewish commentators, saw this. It is about respect. It is about not compounding an evil, lifting your eyes off it. It was bad enough what had happened to him without looking on what had happened to him. So maybe it was doing them a favour as well by averting their eyes from having to look at him.
There's various things you can pull out from the text here. You can get a sense of due reverence for their father. They're both doing it together, covering him. There's also this slow ponderousness about it, and also shamefulness that you should not be looking at your father naked, which, in the era in which we're talking about, that they've just been on an ark, is an interesting way of putting it. They would have been cheek by jowl with each other, and they would have been wearing simple clothes, if anything. And therefore, why does this take place? Afterwards, when Noah wakes, he doesn't curse his son. Ham is ignored. It's Ham's son, Canaan. Why does he curse Canaan? We have to bear in mind as well, this is not God cursing Canaan. This is Noah. Does he have the authority to curse? Why skip the perpetrator for the son? There is a thought in some scholars, which I mentioned at the very beginning, I'll say it again. Is this later writing justifying that the land of Canaan was then subjected by the Israelites, so that it is Canaan that is cursed, but not nations that are descended from Ham, such as Egypt, so that Ham is not cursed for that one reason?
Remember that according to the scripture, Noah is classed as a prophet, prophetic insight. The Bible always teaches that there are consequences for your actions. The ABC of life. Actions bring consequences. If they are sin, well, the consequences can often be dire, and the consequences for your actions may not be actually felt until generations down the line. So the descendants would obviously suffer the consequences of the sins of the fathers. You get Exodus 20 verse 5, Joshua 7, 24 to 26, Ezekiel 18 verse 2. 2 or 3 examples of where consequences get played out in generations later. I look at this from a prophetic perspective in that Noah was looking at Ham and seeing forward and seeing that this type of behaviour would mar his descendants going forward, which would be the Canaanites. Sure enough, it did. Gross disrespect to Noah, attitude that was passed on in terms of the Canaanites towards the others that were around them. Ham did an unspeakable act to Noah, and the Canaanites, by their culture and their society, did unspeakable things in their culture. They were quite an interesting bunch.
So the people hearing this, it's a nod and a wink to what's about to happen in the future.
It says in the Hebrew, a slave he will be, and that's numerically equivalent to 30, which is how much a slave is worth.
Oh really? Never knew that. Oh, that's clever.
Very clever book. It's amazing how it's been put together. I've been trying to write books for years and I've never finished one.
My mind's racing now. It's Noah that curses Canaan, and a hereditary curse. Does he have divine authority to do so?
Oh, I would say that that's a prophetic leaning. Bearing in mind, though, there are some people as well who think that Canaan, as the grandson of Noah, was actually around at the time. So that's another thing that could be chucked into the mix for people. So some of the rabbinical commentary will talk about that Ham and Canaan were around, and it was Canaan who actually wanted to castrate Noah to stop his grandfather from having any more kids. There's a whole piece around that as well. So there are alternatives to all of this.
Like Game of Thrones.
The honouring your father and mother thing, whether it was an unspoken rule, it was certainly there that you honoured the head of the family, the Aleph, Abba, father or dad, which is the head, is first. And so there was an expectation, even just in that the head and the first would be where honour was attributed to. Noah as the head, and certainly as the head of this recreation, being a man from the ground, a tiller of the soil, a farmer, he would have the right to be able to speak out, and he would have the right as a prophet to foretell. He had right to be able to speak like he spoke.
In 26, Noah states, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem." Why not Japheth?
I'm not sure that isn't being used as a catch-all for both. Remember that the verses were put in much later, so this would have all flowed together. And he said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, let Canaan be a slave to them, may God enlarge Japheth." So it's all a flow, so it's like a catch-all, blessed be the Lord. Chum.
Touché, very good. Yeah, very good point. Because Japheth in itself means enlargement and expand, so it's interesting in English. JPS says at 27, God enlarge Japheth. So it's like, God enlarge enlargement. That tickles me. It finishes off that Noah lived beyond the flood a good 3.5 centuries, and he died 950 years.
Longevity, eh? That's always one that gets people.
Just imagine what his knees would have been like.
Goodness me, I know what mine are like now, right? How do we read that? How should we read that? Should we read that as literal 350 years in terms of the way that we measure age today? That's the way it's written. Did people live longer back then? It seems to me that people live longer today. So I guess that the numbers are all there for a reason, and they're all there to tell us something.
I don't know, this is just coming to my mind, but you said quite recently that we die twice, don't we? We die physically, and then we die when we're forgotten.
Yeah, when people stop speaking your name.
So does that refer to that he would have lived a normal life, but then beyond that, he would have been remembered in certain festivities, annual events, until eventually even that ended?
Yeah, a plain literal reading would be that he lived for 350 years. And all of his days came to 950 years, and then he died. Very long-lived. I don't know how long it would be possible for a body to live in the optimum conditions. If there were no negative effects from nature, from the sunshine, from environment, from the food that we put in us, if we didn't suffer from chronic inflammatory conditions, if we didn't suffer from all of those things that seem to come with aging. Because the body is quite a remarkable piece of kit. And so if it was placed in its absolute optimum setting, how long could it go on for? How do you even know how old you are if your body's in good shape and you don't know the passage of time and you don't measure it like we do on calendars and that sort of thing?
you're edging towards subjects that fascinate me, but would be way out there for most people of a religious bent. We're energy. Energy doesn't age. The body ages, but have you noticed some people don't seem to age as much as others? What ages you more than anything? It's thoughts. Our thoughts are energy. And you've got low vibrational energy thoughts like deficit theorizing, negativity, anger. That will age you. But the high level, hope, the love, the gratitude, that is a vibration energy that's different, and that is lighter. God is light, God is thought. Well, you can have thought that is at such a high vibrational, it's just pure light, and that doesn't age you. Seems to me the people I've come across that seem to get younger as they get older is because they're quite joyful.
I've got absolutely no doubt about that, mate. I think that as you think, so you will be, and the most young people are the ones that are young in mind. They are not the ones that are bowed down and bitter and twisted. They actually keep a lightness to their spirit, to their mind, to the way they think, to the way they engage. They laugh, they joke. There's a lightness about them. Even though they are old, you can tell that they are old physically. They're sprightly. There's a sprightliness to them.
It's in their eyes, it's in their face.
Totally. Unlike me, who just is worn, haggard and bowed down.
You need a good belly laugh once a day.
You do need to laugh. I think it is incredibly important, which is why I always start my service with lots of funnies.
I know, I've heard them. When I want to make myself laugh, I just look in the mirror. I can't stop laughing for quite a while.
And I look at the photograph of you that I put next to my mirror so I can laugh too.
I'm famous.
All right then, mate. Till next time.
All going well? You look after yourself. Later, mate.